A man and a woman arrested after fleeing the scene of a crash. This weekend, power outages left over 500 residents without electricity. And a man sentenced to prison for sexually abusing multiple children.
You're watching St. George News at 5.
Good afternoon, I'm Amy Bennett. A man and a woman were both arrested on Saturday after they allegedly fled the scene of a crash in Cedar Canyon. Lizabeth Carvajal and Jaime Jimenez were involved in a collision with another pickup truck on State Route 14 when they fled the scene on foot. A police helicopter then located the two hiding in some trees near the area of the crash, and the two were taken into custody by a group of officers and a K-9 unit. The two are now facing one count of failure to remain at the scene of an injury accident, while Carvajal, who was driving the vehicle, faces additional charges, which include failure to remain in a single lane and driving too fast for conditions. The power outages over the weekend caused a crash on a Bluff Street intersection that sent one woman to the hospital. Here's Jesse Bang with more on the story.
A widespread power outage resulted in downed traffic lights on Sunset Boulevard Sunday morning. Failing to yield, a van entered the darkened intersection and struck a 4Runner that was making a left turn. The 4Runner was then pushed into a Volkswagen, who also was turning left. One female sustained injuries and was taken to the hospital.
Thanks, Jesse. And sticking with the power outages over the weekend, over 500 homes were without power as the storm passed through Washington County. Renee Fleming with the City of St. George Energy Services stated that crews were working hard to restore the electricity as soon as they could. Luckily, the power wasn't out for long, and the city restored all power to everyone in the area. A man who had sexually abused multiple children for over 2 decades pled guilty in court last week and faces almost 20 years in prison. Here's Cody Blowers with more on the story.
On Thursday, a 64-year-old Santa Clara man, Craig Stephen Nebeker, appeared in 5th District Court for sentencing on 3 first-degree felony charges, 2 counts of aggravated sexual abuse of a child and 1 count of sodomy on a child, in a case that was filed in December of last year, following an investigation by the Santa Clara Ivins Police Department. After detectives received a report alleging that Nebeker had molested a child on multiple occasions starting in 2011, the first report led investigators to a second child who was also abused by the defendant, and then to a third child. The state argued for consecutive sentencing, while the defense asked the court to run the terms concurrently due to the defendant's poor health. District Judge Jay Winward made it clear the defendant would be spending some years in prison. The judge had this to say during the hearing.
An indeterminate term at the Utah State Prison of not less than 6 years on each count I find pursuant to the code. Terms are in the interest of justice, but 6 to life is the appropriate sentence on each count, and each count will run consecutive to one another.
Respiratory germs aren't being spread nearly as much this holiday season. Here's Chris Reed with more on the story.
Here's something to be thankful for this Thanksgiving. The local levels of respiratory diseases like COVID, the flu, and RSV are at their lowest Turkey Day levels since before the pandemic. According to data from state and local health departments, this will be the safest November holiday for people as far as germs in years. But local health officials caution that doesn't mean there's no risk at all during these big family gatherings. They especially advise people to stay home and not go to grandmother's house if they feel ill.
Thanks, Chris. And now to Aaron with what happened this past week in sports.
Thanks, Amy. The 4A State Football Championship is over, and the Crimson Cliffs Mustangs have been crowned champions. Crimson Cliffs shut Green Canyon out in the state title game, beating them 33-0. On the first snap for the Mustangs, senior quarterback Steele Barbin threw a 73-yard touchdown pass to Ty West, and the onslaught continued from there. The Mustangs finished with a 13-1 record, and more importantly, the only team in 4A that ended with a win. SUU traveled down south to play Utah Tech and pulled out a 24-16 win over the Trailblazers. It was also a big week for Region 9 baseball players as 4 Snow Canyon Warriors signed to play collegiate baseball next year. The Flyers also had 5 of their players signed to play at the next level as well. Now back to you, Amy.
Thank you for watching St. George News at 5. I'm Amy Bennett with St. George News, your #1 source for local news.
This has been St. George News at 5.